In today's video, I'm going to talk about how I did it. I'm going to show a photo and go through all the different steps of how I created this image. Here's a really nice picture I took a few weeks ago, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how I created the image. So we'll go through what I did with the camera, and then we'll also talk about what I did in the computer with Lightroom and Photoshop. First, let's talk about what I did with the camera. So here's a camera that I use. It's a Canon. This is a 70D, and the lens that I have on it the day that I was out there is a 17 to 50 millimeter, and it goes all the way to f2.8. When I set my settings, I did not use f2.8. I set it for f22. That gave me a lot of depth of field all the way from the beginning to the end, and that was really needed for this image. The other settings that I used, I set my shutter speed for 1/10 of a second. I tried to get it as low as I could because I wanted some blurring with that water. The other one is, if you know the triangle, there's three things: ISO, the f-stop, and the shutter speed. So the ISO on this one, I think it was 200 or 400. So I was using a tripod. Actually, after I got home and I looked at it, I thought, you know what? I could have set my ISO lower, like 100 or a little bit lower than that even. Anyhow, it's too late now. The picture's done. But those are the settings that I used in the camera. Now, if you're using 1/10 of a second, you have to keep the camera steady. So I had a tripod. I have a very nice Bogan tripod, so I set it on there. When I parked my car, I had to hike about a half a mile to get to this nice spot where I was taking the pictures. So I was dragging along this big old tripod over my shoulder and my camera, and I had a GoPro with me so I could shoot some other stuff. So I was kind of burdened down. It was cold that day, and when I was walking, some of the places where I was stepping was kind of slippery, but I made it there. I got down by the water, and I had to go down the bank a few steps, set up my tripod, and started taking the pictures. So it was kind of fun, but when I was done, my fingers were cold and I was done. I was ready to go back to the car. I wasn't going to linger around any longer than I had to. So that's how I did it with the camera settings for this photo. Okay, so now let's talk about the next step. After I got back from my hike, I came into the house and I brought my camera in and I brought out this. That's the SD card, and all the images are on there. I shoot RAW. So the next step is to put it in the card reader to get it into my laptop. And with my laptop, I use Lightroom. So the first thing I did was to import all the images in there and look through them. Some of them I said, nah, I don't want that, and I deleted it. And then I also kind of looked through to find the ones that I think are going to be the best. So in Lightroom, I'll go in and just hit the auto on each one, and it'll automatically set a lot of different settings on there. The shadows, the brightness, the highlights, a lot of different things. And usually with just one hit of auto, it does a really good job. And from there, I export it into a JPEG format, from RAW to JPEG. That's one thing that Lightroom does. So then I'm done with that step. Now I've got them in Photoshop. So then what do? The first thing I do is go through and find the best images, and I work on those best images. What did I do with this image? The first thing I did is I cropped it a little bit. There was some parts of it that I didn't like. There's kind of a brick wall over on the side, and I didn't like all of that. I just put a little bit, and I crop down a little bit from the top so that you're seeing mostly the water. I really wanted those green mossy rocks in the foreground, and I wanted as much as that white fast moving water as I could get. So the first thing was the cropping, and then I would hit the curves. I have regular curves that I use many times, so I just have to click that in an action and say, okay, give me those curves. So what the curves does is it takes the white, the red, the green, and the blue, and it brings the darks a little bit lower, and it brings the highlights up, and it just gives the photo a little more zing, a little more punch. So after I hit the curves, then I go through and look around. I call it pulling weeds. Sometimes there's little weird things you have to get rid of, like little tufts of grass or some leaves or spots, or somebody left a gum wrapper somewhere. Anyhow, this one didn't need much, so pulling the weeds was not too much. Then I go to two different steps, and this is what I learned from the darkroom in the old days with an enlarger and with 3 trays of developer, stop, bath, and fixer, dodging and burning. So because I understand it from beams of light coming down and hitting photographic paper, I understand it very clearly, is you're going to go to the things that you want darker and you burn in more light onto that photographic paper. That's how my brain is thinking about it. Digitally, it's a little bit different, but it's the same basic concept. So I went in and got some of those dark spots, some of the shadows on the rocks, and I burned in the shadows and I gave them a little bit more darkness. You can set it from 0 to 99. You don't set it to 99. You don't set it to 50. Mine is set at like 5, very, very low. And you just gradually go a little bit, little bit, little bit. So I darken that. Then I go over to dodge. So the white parts of this, I wanted them really white. So I went in with a very small brush and just dodged it. So I wanted the whites nice and white. So after that, this picture started looking really good and I liked it. And one of the last things that I usually do is vignette. And that means you darken the corners of the frame. So all around the outsides of it, I'm going to darken, darken, darken. And that is because you want the person viewing this, you want them to focus their attention on the center of the image. So what you're doing is you're darkening out the edges so that you keep their eyes away from the edges. You want them to focus on the center of the photo. That's kind of a trick. Besides vignetting with darkening it, you can also do it with blurring. I don't usually use that, but sometimes I have done that. I go around and blur the edges. So what I usually use is the lasso tool, and I'll go lasso the main part of it, and then I'll select the inverse. So you're selecting not the main part that you just selected with the lasso tool, and then you darken that. Or you can blur it if you want. Depends on what you're trying to do. But there it is. That's the final image. I really like it. And this is not an image that you could take with an iPhone out there. This is an image that took me hiking out with a tripod, knowing how to set the camera, and then coming back into my computer, my digital darkroom, and making a few little minor tweaks and adjustments. And that is the image. That's how I did it. All right. Thank you very much for watching my video. Check back in the future. I'll have more interesting videos about photography and other topics. And why don't you do me a favor and subscribe to my channel? All right. Thanks. Bye.